and he creates his own offensive chance with that motor.
Krejci to Coyle, and the Leafs are mulched again!
Hey there, welcome to the NESN Bruins Podcast. I'm NESN.com's Mike Cole, joined as always by NESN.com's Logan. Mullen. Logan, how are you?
Good. What's up, Mike?
Same stuff, different day, as they say, keeping it safe for work here. We are in a Groundhog Day holding pattern. And I think today, we had some bad timing last week here on the NESN Bruins Podcast.
Awful. I feel like it's been awful a lot lately.
I know. Yeah, we have not, and actually we should probably say we're recording this on a Wednesday. If I'm not mistaken,
3:09 p.m. Eastern too, for when something inevitably breaks at about 5 o'clock tonight.
Well, so today we're gonna kick around and really dive into some of the scenarios that are being discussed in terms of resuming the NHL season, and kind of give a status update, try to get a little more in depth on that, which we've tried to do the last few weeks. And we did last week, and like I said, bad timing. Pretty much as soon as we finished recording, it seemed like an avalanche of news came out in terms of where the status was and all of that. And this stuff, changes almost daily. It certainly changes weekly. We will get into our confidence poll in terms of where we're at with things returning. But that's just going to continue to change, I think, until we really get some hard news, whether it's a cancellation or a plan to resume. That being said, I think the current quarantine order is through or until May 1st, if I'm not mistaken, for the NHL. So we're actually timing ourselves out here pretty poorly just to start, because April is just about over, and we will get formal announcement fairly soon in terms of what the next steps are. But reports are indicating that the expectation is the quarantine or the self-quarantine will extend into mid-May. I know Darren Dreger said that on TSN's Insider Trading earlier this week. So let's just, I guess, operate under that assumption. Is that we're not
there's the two other reports too, right? The Larry Brooks New York Post one that said some team out there has already told their team be ready to report May 15th, and then you had the John Scott tweet that basically said June 1st, expect teams back in training camp. So I almost put a little bit more credence into the John Scott one. I don't know if he was just trying to see if he could dupe people, but
it's a good. I'm with you, because I think everything is going toward that right now, right? Like, that seems to be the plan in place without formally being in place. The question is going to be when May 13th, 14th, 15th rolls around, where are we there? And maybe we'll get an indication of that a week before, as the league maybe realizes, this is not going to work. And
you're going to have an issue here in Massachusetts, because the stay-at-home order just got extended to May 18th.
And that was going to be my next point. Is Sportsnet's Chris Johnson reported he was tweeting about. I think he was tweeting Tuesday. He said there continues to be hope and belief among teams that the facilities could start opening for small group skates as soon as May 15th. And to your point, I mean, it's 3 days. Let's just say he's right. Let's say that's where the NHL is, and let's say they say go ahead on May 15th. It costs the Bruins at least 3 days. Because
it does, and maybe you look at a situation where it is like captain's practices, where you can have informal skates in the middle of May, and then legitimate training camps restart in June 1st or mid-June or whenever. But
it's interesting.
It does beg the question about competitive advantage versus disadvantage. Like, should the Bruins be in a bad position because the Panthers are able to practice, or the Lightning are able to practice, or whatever? But I think that we may see the self-quarantine matter lifted in mid-May, but I don't necessarily think that means that teams are back practicing that day.
Well, it'll be interesting too. Like, you could say, that May 15th date that Johnson's thrown around, a lot of other people have thrown around, maybe that does become May 18th. Let's push this to, the 15th is a Friday, the 18th is a Monday, if I'm not mistaken. Don't quote me on that, but I think
you're
that's
right.
the case. So let's just push it to the 18th. Everybody starts fresh on a Monday, and that coincides with Massachusetts, which if we're being honest, selfishly from a Bruins podcast standpoint, that's where we're most invested. But I also think you're dealing with the best team in the league, at least what you had before. So let's go May 18th as, we'll do a hard reset on that Monday. I also wonder, this is something I was thinking about, so let's say Rhode Island, because Rhode Island's actually doing a very good job in terms of the testing numbers are high. Their positive infection case rate is pretty low, which is exactly what you're going for, right? Is like a nice high percentage of tests and a low infection rate. So let's just say they continue to do well. Everything's opened up there. What's to stop, a handful of Bruins from going down 95, go to the dunk or just finding ice down there. So I wonder if that'll start happening at some point just to get a skate in, because you don't, I don't seriously, stop and think about it as much as I probably should, that basketball and hockey, you have to be at your place to really practice what you do. Right. You know what I mean? You can go out, if you play baseball, you go out and play catch in the backyard. And I assume, or I suppose, basketball players can go out and shoot hoops, but if you live downtown Boston, where are you going to shoot hoops? Yeah. And same thing with hockey. So these guys literally have not done anything other than Peloton races and maybe some, relatively simple off ice work. So
yeah, well, that's what everyone said too, is you can't judge how quickly it will take them to get back until you get guys on the ice. And that's what makes this different than anything else. So the fact that even during the off season, when guys have X amount of months off, depending on where their season ended, they still had the opportunity to find ice and ramp up skating when they needed to. Unless you're living in Sweden right now, most guys don't have that opportunity.
Or yeah, exactly. That's the weird thing about this entire pandemic and what it's done is you talk about it financially, how it affects teams, how it affects broadcast partners, how it affects the economy near the rink, et cetera, et cetera. At least in a lockout, those things can continue to go on.
Right.
You find other ways. Everything's at a standstill right now, so this is just full stop, and that kind of changes the entire tenor of it as well.
Yeah, well, and I got news for you, too. Even if things open back up and the league says, all right, May 15th, everybody come back, you mean to tell me there's not going to be travel issues for, A, guys coming from Canada, and B, on a larger scale, guys that may have gone home to Russia or Europe or wherever? I don't think it's going to be a smooth process getting back over. I don't know that for sure, but I have a very hard time envisioning guys who went back to Sweden are able to, especially where there were effectively no barriers or no restrictions, that it's just going to be yep, come on back, with nary a worry.
Yeah, which is interesting too, because everybody thought that the Swedish guys were going to be ahead of the game because they've been skating, over there without many restrictions. But yeah, if they come back, I imagine there'd be some sort of quarantine period, and that's assuming they can get back, because it's just
right.
Don Fear made this point. I forget with whom he was speaking, but he even pointed out, the American-Canadian border, there are issues right now too. Yeah. You can't go back and forth from Canada and America. So that's going to have to be, relaxed at some point as well. You also look at using the NBA as an example, which is, I think the NHL seems perfectly content laying out and waiting for the NBA to make, to lead the way on this one, which is whatever. I understand that to an extent, but I don't know if you saw just the protocols that are going to be established or, what are being considered for that May 8th return for the NBA or whenever it is, and saying, you're going to have only a certain amount of guys in the facility at once. You're going to have to be tested before you come in, or take your temperature in the parking lot. Come in, guys can't work out together. I think it was the ball boys have to wear gloves and are disinfecting their sneakers. That's a lot, and I imagine the NHL is going to face similar hurdles.
Mm-hmm.
Absent of testing, high volume testing, this is going to be extremely difficult. And I think even me, who's been a pessimist throughout this entire thing, is kind of underestimated how difficult this is going to be.
Yeah. Well, I think we all understood it at a surface level. And then once you start itemizing everything, it's well, crap, I didn't realize, even as vast as we all thought it probably was going to be, I don't think until you put pen to paper and list everything out, you realize just how, I guess, tedious So this is going to end up being and difficult to enforce too. Especially if use the example of guys going to neighboring states if they have the option. What if New Jersey opens before New York? Things
Right.
like that. I mean, the Bruins aren't the only ones that could potentially benefit from that. It's going to be challenging to enforce no matter what, but it just depends on how hell-bent they are on getting the season finished. And I forget if it's specifically the NHL. Part of me wants to think the NHL, is it Bill Daly, has said that it was I think, I don't want to misquote him, but it was something to the effect of one positive test isn't necessarily going to shut the entire league down.
You even said multiple positive tests won't.
Right. I guess if the NHL decides that they want to finish this season out, they, short of hell on earth, they pretty much have to finish it. Like, if they're going to commit themselves to doing that, and it sounds like with comments like that, they're attempting to lay the groundwork to say, this isn't March. Like, if one player tests positive, we'll effectively put them on injured reserve, and they won't play, and they'll be away from the team. But otherwise, it would be far more, I don't want to say catastrophic, but detrimental to the NHL's image if they resume the season, too many players test positive again, and they cancel it then, than just outright canceling it right now.
I actually don't have a problem with them saying if one or two guys or three, whatever, however that number is, if those guys, if a handful of guys test positive, we're not shutting this down. I have no problem with them saying that. Like, I don't think that's callous or anything. Like, as long as people smarter than the hockey executives are saying it's okay to do this, then God bless you. Go nuts. It might look terrible. You know what I mean? Because you're going to get these people on Twitter who I've given way too much attention to, just the replies to all these people, the replies to the reporters who just, no matter what the news is, say, what, just cancel the season. Just cancel it. What's the point? I don't like those people because it's like, well, let's at least try. But this is that, if one guy tests positive, that's fuel for that crowd that says, what are we even doing here? Yeah. I think that's the wrong way to look at it. That's just my personal opinion. So I applaud the NHL to that standpoint. But there will be, I imagine there's got to be something that, the CDC or whomever is going to say, if this gets to a certain point, you guys got to cut it short. And you're right. That's worse than what they're at right now, I think.
Yeah, well, and I think we're going to potentially reach a point, too, where I am sure the league has a hard date in mind for when they have to have a decision by. Yeah, similarly, we hear with baseball all these reports that, like, they want to have some sort of idea in place by, hopefully mid to late May or whatever, the Jeff Passan report or the Bob Nightingale one, whatever. I think the NHL, even if it hasn't gotten out yet, has some sort of idea about when they would like to have things going on. And as we've said from the beginning, they don't need to cancel right now. Like, they don't need to make a decision right now. You look at where we are here on, what's today, April 29th versus where we were a month and a half ago, and you have, states all across the country whose curves are either flattened or declining. Yeah. It's just, where are we going to be June 1st? Where are we going to be mid-June? Like, if the league is intent on playing, restarting games as far down the road as July 1st, then they would be silly right now to make some sort of sweeping decision. So I don't think they're under any obligation to make any sort of move right now. And I think they are perfectly content to just sort of let things come to them and say, okay, look at every NHL city, and there's going to be at least a 2-week period with sharp decline or a steady decline by June 1st, June 15th, whenever, and say, we'll go from there. But I think it would not be a wise business decision right now to just, I get the optics might look better if they're like, there are things bigger than sports right now. Totally understand if they wanted to take that approach, but there's too much money for them involved for them to just do that. And I think it would not be a prudent business decision for them on April 29th, really any time before June 1st. I don't think it would be prudent of them to say, we're not doing this. I think we have a long time before we start to see any sort of movement towards the nothing's happening.
Yeah, we're definitely, it feels like, I would say we've made positive progress, right, in the last 6 weeks.
Yeah, I mean,
I think
it's
that's a
been
really
both ways, right? It's gotten
Yeah.
significantly worse, but at the same time, it's
Right.
been a 6-week sample size. So while
Yeah.
it has gotten worse, in many respects, it has gotten better.
Yeah, I was gonna say
Air quotes.
60,000 people have died. I don't want to marginalize that, but
No.
it feels like. But then again, I mean, there's gonna be plenty of people to say, "All right, fine," but once we loosen everything, we're gonna go right back to where we were. So who knows? I think the testing thing is a huge thing that they're gonna have to figure out as well, and maybe you get some momentum here in early May that makes that picture a little clearer. But like, how do you think May is like the most important month in the history of American sports at this
Probably.
rate? In the collective, at least collectively speaking, it's up there, or at least in the recent memory where, I think by Memorial Day, you're going to have decisions made across the board. Because it's just going to take a while to figure out the logistics, and it's going to take a while to get going, especially for a sport like hockey where you're plucking players back from all over the world. So that's something to keep in mind as well. But and one last point I wanted to make is not even my own point, but it was brought up by Darren Dreger, who said, the cost analysis discussion is going to have to have at some point where it's like, are you even losing, you're losing money at what point do you say, we're going to lose more money by trying to put this all together, and the investment that you're going to have to make in terms of getting this going again, is that going to be higher than the money you're going to make off the TV deals? I think it's an interesting point, because like there's going to be no game, so.
Yeah, well, and I think that you have to play the long game with this too. Like you look at the trickle down effect and you say, okay, well, we probably would not lose money, but it might be, I don't know. If you're playing games without fans, your total revenue probably is not going to be through the roof. But if the TV deal's coming up, right? The American TV deal with NBC, like that's coming up soon. You'd think about escrow for the players. You think about you think about the salary cap. Like you need to tell me if players find out that the escrow is going up to like 30%, that they're not going to say, you know what, figure it out, we'll play it in front of fans, and all of a sudden you become far more amenable to playing under less than ideal circumstances.
I think there's like $400 to $500 million at stake for playoff related revenue that they can make, which seems
at least for TV. My understanding is that almost all of their TV revenue comes from the playoffs.
Oh, that makes I guess that makes
sense. Like regular season telecasts nationally are means
right. I mean, because it's a national TV deal. I as a loyal employee of a regional sports network, I am curious to find out how that is involved at some point here. Whether I mean, NESN would get. Well, we get the first round. So I wonder.
Regional, the RSNs get the quarterfinal.
Like I've made this
the quarterfinal. Yeah. The conference
first round now, it would be interesting to kind of maybe extend that around if you can, and just do in market. You can watch it on your RSN to kind of give some love back to the RSNs there. But
you wouldn't catch me fighting that.
Yeah, I know. The NHL could also say, well, you got 75 games in, so it's not that big of a deal.
It's all up in the air.
All right, the most important part of our podcast, what is your confidence level, 1 to 10, 10 being
so I've been hovering at a 4 for a long time, a 4 or 5. I think I'm up. I think I'm at like a 7.
Whoa!
I think they're trying – again, this doesn't reflect what I think they necessarily should do. Everything I've heard over the last week with the John Scott stuff, the Larry Brooks stuff, they're going to figure this out, I think. I seriously – right or wrong, I think they're figuring out a way to try and get this done by any means necessary. And I have a very hard time envisioning them not letting this happen, just with how from the day they paused the season and sent out that release that their goal is still to give out the Stanley Cup. I do not think they've wavered from that in the least bit. And understandably, there were times over this past month where things seemed highly unlikely that hockey would resume. I think now they're looking at this and saying, we could push back next season, still get 82 games in, and buy ourselves a lot of time that we think will allow things to get, by comparison, more under control and allow them to play, even if it is in empty arenas or arenas with, a quarter capacity, what have you. I don't necessarily think it's the right thing to do, but I think they are very confident that that they're going to make a postseason happen, if nothing else.
About a 3.
Are you really? Okay, that's
from,
up though, right?
Up from a 2.5, I think. Yeah. For those reasons, but I still think it comes down to testing, and it comes down to being able to logistically figure it out. And I know that they've had a lot of time, and I know that they're willing to even go into August or September to finish the season.
Yeah, Labor Day.
But I don't know. I do think especially for the NHL, you get to a certain point where they're going to be like, the money just doesn't work out enough for us to go through the hassle. So that's still where I'm at, but I think that's subject to change over the course of a week even, because, again, this thing is so fluid at this point. Who knows? We get done with this call, and all of a sudden, the pharmaceutical world makes a breakthrough. Maybe a therapeutic comes through, et cetera, et cetera. I saw, the president
Oxford,
is
right?
Yeah, exactly. They're working on a top secret vaccination project, as it were. So who knows? But for now, I'm still, I just haven't seen it. I hear all the speculation, but I feel like that also changes daily, so it's hard to put too much stock in that. So I haven't heard anything that really puts me in a much more positive light yet. So, let's just assume real quick they do restart in. So what? When are the playoffs going to start? Under your 7 confidence mindset.
I'd say July 1st.
So that doesn't help the Bruins at all, does it?
Well, here, let's say this: a regular season, July, third week of July, third week of June,
yeah.
finish up, and then playoffs are starting by July 1. So the playoffs typically take a little over 2 months, like right around 2 months.
Yeah.
I'd say you're probably, if there isn't travel involved, then you can keep playing. Like if you have teams all in one space,
right.
Typically what you're doing is sometimes you have 2 days in between games for travel, whatnot. You can probably expedite things a little bit, but July 1 through the end of August, like they could probably get that done.
Yeah. So that this layoff probably doesn't help the Bruins though, for being honest. So like I almost think if you get through the first round, they'll be okay, because I think like maybe that's where the rest comes in, is you get older players. This is a chance to freshen them up, but I just worry about them being ready in time when this thing resumes, especially having an older team. Just something Brad Marchand even pointed out a couple of weeks ago on a Zoom call.
I do wonder how much of that might be overstated. Like, look at it.
Sure.
Honestly, not to say that David Krejci and Patrice Bergeron don't keep themselves in good shape, but a lot of people talk about the Bruins' age. I look at the 42-year-old or now 43-year-old, right, playing for the Bruins, and it's like the reason Zdeno Chara is still playing is, one, because his height helps, cover any mistakes he might otherwise make. Also, the fact that he is a fitness freak and he has made his livelihood by being in impeccable shape and logging these massive minutes. So even if he's been off the ice for a while, I don't see Zdeno Chara rolling up being in just appalling shape. So it probably would take some of those guys a little longer to get going. I don't necessarily dispute that notion in a vacuum, but I think we might be overstating it a little bit, whereas the Bruins, I don't think they necessarily would have a humongous disadvantage because their team is a little bit older. Now, if the question becomes, well, what happens if you play some team that you finish the regular season, you play a team that had to sneak in, and all of a sudden you get a red-hot New York Rangers or Florida Panthers while you're just trying to find your footing, then, okay, that's a different conversation because weird things happen in the hockey playoffs.
Yeah, that's true. And we have no idea. This is so unprecedented that it's hard to have a take one way or another. So.
Right.
All right, before we get out of here, we have another Bruins prospect update, courtesy of, you. You talked to, why don't you tee up your interview with Jack Ahcan?
Oh, taking over the hosting duties?
You're the one who talked to him.
I am, yeah. I talked to Jack Ahcan, who is an undrafted college free agent that the Bruins signed. His draft year was 2017. He didn't get picked, but in the ensuing years, he became a pretty highly sought-after college free agent. He shared a lot of interesting stories about the Bruins' courtship of him leading up to the time that he actually signed with the Bruins. He's an undersized 5'8", 185-pound puck-moving defenseman, but everyone that I talked to and have seen says that at the defensive area of his game very much rounded out well. He did play at World Juniors back in December 2016 into January 2017. That was the Charlie McAvoy team. In fact, Ahcan ended up being the only player on that team that did not get drafted to an NHL team. But he does have some connections within the organization. Tuukka Rask shares an agent with. McAvoy he played with on Team USA. So very interesting guy, very interesting story. So it's a pretty good interview. It's about 10, 11 minutes long, but he's an interesting guy.
Delightful. Let's just wrap up our weekly get together with that interview. So listen to that, and we'll be back again next week to pour over the small, minute details and changes. Or who knows? Maybe there'll be huge news to discuss by this time next week. So I look forward to it. So enjoy the interview, and we'll see you again right here next week.
It sounds like you might have had some options. So I guess what kind of drew you to or sold you on the Bruins?
One of the bigger things was, how hard they were kind of on me the whole year. They had guys at every game, watching me, whether it was like, I know Donnie Sweeney, he came to one of the home games in St. Cloud, and it was a big blizzard snowstorm, and he didn't even tell my agent. He was just he popped in and popped out and didn't really say anything. And then afterwards he told my agent and was like, hey, watched him. And he, they don't have to really do that and, put their effort into me. And just the way they were kind of leading it the whole way. Their style of play obviously is fun to watch and kind of fits my game, hard-nosed defense, and then, like to play with the puck on offense and make plays and stuff like that. So I think it just kind of was a combination of all those things. And I was just so excited to be able to get the job done with them. And I think they were just as excited as I was.
Mm-hmm. So at what point did you start to realize that, you might have some choices to make and that there was a good bit of NHL interest in you?
I think it really started the end of my junior year. I didn't really go through the process as much as I did this year, but there were a few teams interested after my junior season, and there's a few phone calls that were made. My agent came up to St. Cloud, and we kind of went through some paperwork and just kind of showed me the depth charts and what teams need me where and stuff like that. So it was really kind of a cool experience, and it was helpful for me last year to be able to be comfortable this year and be able to talk to these guys on the phone because of the quarantine. Obviously, it would have been nice to fly out and meet people face to face, but in the end, I think last year it really helped me be comfortable this year, and talking on the phone and stuff like that. It made myself really comfortable.
Mm-hmm. So your coach Brett Larson had told me that you're a pretty motivated guy, and one thing I'm curious to know is when your draft year was 2017, you didn't get picked. In the aftermath of that, how did you kind of leverage that to use it as motivation?
Yeah, I guess I never really coming up, kind of a late bloomer, being an undersized guy. It wasn't really a big stab in the chest when I didn't get drafted in 2017. But one of the biggest things that I thought of, and my parents and my agent kind of went over, was, hey, now we get to pick wherever we want to go when you do start turning some heads. And that was the biggest thing for me. I always had that in the back of my mind where, these teams who didn't draft me, they're going to be wanting me when I come out as a free agent. And that was the case at the end. So that's kind of the motion that we kind of took forward is, they're going to regret not taking me in that draft, but even better, I get to choose what team I want to go to. And I believe I took a really good chance, and my senior year had a good year, and then got the opportunity to pick the Bruins.
Mm-hmm. Now, the Bruins do have a pretty good track record with undrafted college free agents between, right now it's Torrey Krug, Kevin Miller, and Carson Kuhlman. Is that at all, a draw for you that you're going to a team that has success picking guys out of the college game?
Yeah, that was another big reason why the Bruins were kind of on my top list there. And I actually spoke to Carson, got to know him a little bit over the phone, and I talked to McAvoy, who I played with at World Juniors, and just kind of dug in a little bit of information out of those guys. And Tuukka Rask, he's with my agency as well, so just kind of digging up all the information I could get. And their track record is, like you said, it's great with their college free agents, and that was one reason why, if they've done it for how many years with Krug being a free agent coming out of college there, that was a big thing for me and my family. And when I do end up getting out there to Boston, and hopefully I can learn a lot of things and maximize my ability to play, it was definitely a big thing for me.
Mm-hmm. Now, in terms of your game itself, I guess first, is there anyone that you model your game after?
Yeah, I mean, I always like to say, a lot of the undersized defensemen, but Krug obviously he's been in the league for quite a bit here, and I've been watching, especially the Bruins, but him as well. Whenever they're on TV, I like to watch them and watch how Krug and Grzelcyk play. Being undersized, it's kind of fun watching them and their tendencies and seeing some similarities in their game. And maybe I see something that I haven't really thought of doing on the ice, and I watch them do it and try it out in practice, and then get comfortable enough to try it in a game. It's something that's really helpful for me, and I really love watching the NHL, and hopefully one day get to play. But that's a big thing for me is Torrey Krug, watching him play, undersized left shot defenseman. It's pretty cool watching how he's kind of built his game over the past few years in the NHL.
Now, a lot of people talk about your offensive game, but even your coach yesterday pointed out that your defensive game has really come around. Can you kind of give me, I guess, a scouting report on yourself and, describe your style of play overall?
Yeah, I think one of my main points in my game are, my hockey IQ, and that leads to even defensively without the puck, just being in the right position so you don't have to work too hard, whether it's in the D zone or the neutral zone, gapping up. It's one of the things I like to kind of model my game around is, try to skate forward as much as possible, and then when I have to skate backwards, it's trying to gain that gap and transition, and then in the D zone, just trying not to lose those little battles, whether it's in front of the net or in the corner. If it's a big guy in the corner, maybe back off and play a little bit more defensively, or even try to blow them up. I mean, it's kind of the best of both worlds with me is I've never really backed down from the battle, and I think I've done that ever since I was a little kid. So that's kind of a staple in my game. And then offensively, kind of a pass first guy. Like to make plays. If the opportunity is there and I get put on a power play, I think I strive in that kind of environment. And, it's just try to model my game a little bit more because the offensive talent is there, and I've been really working on my defensive zone and neutral zone gaps and stuff like that. So that's one area that I've been really working hard at.
Now, the Bruins, yourself included now, have a fair amount of left shot defensive prospects. So how do you kind of view, I guess, what's your outlook on having some internal competition up and down the organization?
I think it's great. That's going to make myself better as well as the organization. One thing that the Bruins said is you're not going to get given anything. You're going to have to earn your opportunity. And I think ever since I was a little kid, it's been, you got to beat somebody out, and that's what I'm going to try to do. And like I said, they're not going to, just because I signed with them, they're not just going to give me an opportunity. I'm going to have to go into camp and, work hard and show them what I got and hopefully earn a spot. And if not, you're just going to have to work hard. And that's what I've done all my life. So I think it's going to be a really fun experience for me, and I'm looking forward to it.
Now, you've been to a few NHL development camps. What's been some of the feedback you've gotten during those, and how have you kind of worked them into your game at St. Cloud?
Yeah, I think a lot of the guys, when I am at a camp or something like that, it's they see the offensive side of me, and then it's more so like they're kind of surprised with how hard I defend in the D zone, and just even little puck battles. It's kind of cool and encouraging to hear those things, but that also makes me want to work harder and battle even harder for these guys telling me that I do battle hard. So it's something, I've been to 4 camps and all great experiences with teams, and just hearing that kind of stuff from NHL, whether it's the coaches or it's like personnel there. It's really cool to hear as well. It's more encouraging that I can, get into the organization with Boston and, hear this every day and work on the skills that I need to work on. And I think that's one thing that I'm looking forward to, is just kind of being a sponge and learning from these guys and players around the league, where I can really become the player that I really want to be.
Mm-hmm. Now, what's an off season typically look like for you? And, I know a lot of things are uncertain right now with the pandemic, but what's your off season going to look like now that you're done with school and you're joining the pro ranks?
Yeah, so ever since I was probably, I'd say 15, I was working, hockey camps or little things like that, working on baseball fields. And this summer it's going to be nice where I can really just focus on hockey and training and skating and stuff like that. So I usually got my work done earlier in the day and then worked out and skated later, and maybe would have been a little tired as getting done with a 5-hour shift or something like that. So this summer it's going to be, work out in the morning, skate after that, and then, have the rest of the day to, whether I want to, train more or maybe go golfing or something like that. It's going to really open up my schedule. And that's one thing I'm looking forward to is being able to really focus on just hockey this summer.
Mm-hmm. Now, last one I have for you. When I was doing a little background research, one thing I stumbled upon was your excitement to visit Fenway Park a few years ago. Can you tell me a little bit about your experience there in Boston as a whole?
Yeah, so I've been a huge baseball fanatic ever since I was a little kid. It was always baseball and hockey, and then after my junior year, I had to pick one. Going to Cedar Rapids the following year, just kind of focusing more on hockey. And when I think it was my junior year, we got to go out and play BC and Northeastern, and got the opportunity to go out to Fenway, and just all the history at that field, and the movies that are there, and just all the history that the Red Sox have had there. Being a championship team, it was just overwhelming for me. I was taking pictures. I was telling people like how much I wanted to be there, and how when I was a little kid, I always wanted to play on a Major League Baseball field and stuff like that. So I was like a little kid in a candy store when we got out there, and it was just an amazing experience, and very grateful that I got to have the opportunity to do that.